Is it possible to approach any topic without bias? A lot of people would say that you can, and that we need to do everything we can to limit bias to the point of eliminating it. Now, while I agree that we need to do everything we can to limit bias when we're trying to understand truth and um, work through a problem, because our bias is going to color our lens. It's going to make it harder for us to see the truth, or just see generally what we're looking at in an unbiased light. The difficulty is that biases almost always are something that we aren't fully aware of. They're your bias. They tend to be a hidden thing. Now, philosophers tend to treat biases as something that they want to find. Like, what is it that I hold that's behind the scenes that's coloring my lenses? And they try to find that and then eliminate it in their search for truth. That's all well and good, but it's almost guaranteed that you haven't found everything. We are, in a lot of ways, blind to our own blind spots, and a bias is often a blind spot. So there's definitely a sense where we can't actually approach something without some level of bias. But sometimes, and this is actually a key point, a bias can be a good thing, but it needs to be something that we know is a bias and we have intentionally allowed it to remain for a very good reason. I guess the idea that I'm trying to get at here is that there are some forms of presuppositions, which is kind of another idea for a bias, they're good. They're not inherently bad. Some biases, some presuppositions are inherently bad. Some are good, and others are fairly neutral. So basically, I'm saying that sometimes it's okay if we're bringing a certain bias to the equation, but it's almost always best to know that you have the bias and that you're intentionally bringing it, because a lot of the times people just don't even know that there's a bias, and if you don't know that there is a bias, it's almost impossible for you to know. Well, it is impossible if you don't know that there's a bias, that that bias is a decent one to bring. Overall, it's generally agreed upon by pretty much all scholars, and I think I would agree with it too, that there is no such thing as a true biasless engagement with a topic. Everything that we bring, including how we learned, what we learned, the way that we learned to apply different things growing up, that is functionally a bias. It's probably impossible, we'll say, to have no bias whatsoever. But does that mean the attempt to have as little bias is bad? So, for example, this topic came up from a previous video that I did where I talked about the role of philosophy in theology. Should we be using philosophy? And that in there's a lot of people who approach theology purely from reason, purely from philosophy. Well, odds are, one, fairly decent that they aren't actually coming at it from a pure philosophy idea. I mean, the fact that they are approaching a topic at all on God assumes that there's some level of bias there. They have at least the concept of gods, and they're trying to reason towards it. But also, even just saying, hey, I'm only going to approach this from philosophy, in and of itself is a bias. Why are you picking philosophy? Is that more objective? It might be more objective, but it depends on the topic. If, for example, if we're bringing in a topic that we need actual data points for, philosophy, pure reason, like not touching any data points except I'm just using my brain, is actually probably not going to work all that well. So you really want philosophy to be an interpretive thing. You take data points, you see different pieces of information, and you use philosophy, you use reason to ask the big questions about those things. Why does this function in this way? Where did it come from in the first place? How does it fit in the grand scheme of things? Those are philosophical questions. So, but the approach from philosophy itself is a bias, is I guess what I'm trying to say here. So I'm not convinced that we, one, are capable of not bringing some level of bias. I'm also not convinced, I'm actually fairly convinced in the opposite direction, that all bias is bad. I believe that there is good, neutral, and bad biases or presuppositions. But we should focus on trying to figure out what those are to make sure that bad presuppositions aren't coloring what we are seeing. Overall, though, it's a... I mean, I think it's a fascinating topic that really gets into some of the nitty-gritty of what we would call epistemology, of how we even know what we know, and what we're even capable of trying to figure out. One of the things we just have to deal with is the fact of presuppositions or bias, and trying to mitigate it in a way that actually aligns with what's possible without going too far and claiming I have no bias. I'm perfectly free from any sort of presupposition. It's just not reasonable.